Test, 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 1, 2, test, test.
Hear me?
We can hear you.
On the music. Come on, Wayne, get it together.
Hello? There we go. There we go. I guess you call these technical difficulties. Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you here this evening to the Tell It Like It Is get-together rally for Governor Christie. My name is Wayne McDonald. I have the privilege of serving in the New Hampshire House of Representatives, representing the great town of Londonderry. Nothing against Windham or Salem or any of these other towns. It is in Rockingham County, though. So again, welcome on this beautiful evening. I was in charge of the weather. That's why it isn't raining. I couldn't control the temperature, but I did control the precipitation. At this time, I'd like to ask Ed Huenick to come up and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Like your sign.
Thank you, Wayne. I have a special sign tonight. What do you think of that ticket? I think that ticket, Christie Sununu, is a winning ticket. What do you think? I should have worn my Team Cheney hat tonight. Okay, let's get serious. Are you ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Ed. You want your sign? Next, I have the pleasure of making an introduction. Before I do that, I just want to reflect on the fact that 8 years ago, I was very proud to support Governor Christie for president. I think many of us agree, and I know I am convinced this country and this world would be an awful lot better off today if he had won 8 years ago. That's why he's got to win this time. But 8 years ago, I also was very proud to support this other gentleman. And I can tell you for certain, our state is infinitely better off today than it was 8 years ago, thanks to him. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Christie Sununu.
All right, you guys excited? This is going to be a good night. We're going to have a lot of fun. It's been great. I'm going to take a couple seconds. I'm going to do this. Wayne, the cameras are over here. You got to, speaking 101, as a good politician, you always look right into that camera, give a good smile. But I've seen Governor Christie do these roundtables before, and they literally are a roundtable. So I'm not used to this. So I'm going to be spinning in circles for a few seconds as I introduce him. Look, we have an amazing opportunity, an amazing obligation here in New Hampshire. We have all this economic opportunity. The state is doing well. We're crushing it. We really are. Compared to the rest of the country, there's 49 other states that would love to be in our position, none of which is, of course, the Governor Christie's former state, New Jersey. And you might know that because everyone in New Jersey and New York seem to be wanting to move up here lately. And that's fine. They can come. Let's just remind them why they came, what Live Free or Die is all about. They can keep their politics back in Jersey, but they can come here and we can teach them and open their eyes to what it is to live free or die. Because it is not just 4 words on a license plate, as we say all the time, right? It is truly the foundation of how we live here. It is about limited government and local control, not just big government control, but local control where the individual, where you, the voter, the taxpayer in your town have the most say how your taxes are going to be spent, what potholes are going to be filled, and most importantly, what's going to go on in your schools. And that's what happens right here in Salem and Derry. It's not just Concord, and it sure as hell ain't Washington, D.C. You guys are the ones that have the say, and we're the example of that. Fiscal responsibility. I'm talking to Washington now. There's 2 words called fiscal responsibility. I don't know if anybody in Washington, D.C. understands those words lately. And I've been pretty blunt about it. I think Republicans themselves have fallen down on the concept of being fiscally responsible in Washington. The idea that they keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing money, and somebody has to pay. And it's us. It's our kids. It's our grandkids. It's our grandkids. And it's real money. It's tangible. $32 trillion. Is such a huge number, it's almost gotten like people don't believe in it anymore. Well, we'll just keep printing it. That's not the way it works. Somebody has to pay. Now, we have this amazing opportunity in this country to actually start getting stuff done and moving stuff forward. And New Hampshire is the first filter, right? That's that responsibility that we talk about all the time. The rest of the country is watching Iowa a little bit. And New Hampshire, right? We're partners with Iowa. As long as they keep it a caucus, we're good. They're good. We're keeping everything good. I talked to Kim, Governor Reynolds, the other day. Don't worry, Chris, it's a caucus. I said, okay, Kim, ours will be a primary, and we're going to go first. Regardless of what Joe Biden says, we're damn well going to go first. And it's not because we want to. It's not because it's a nice tradition. Frankly, it's because we do it better than anybody else. We have some of the highest voter turnout in the country. We have the smartest voters, the most educated voters that ask the toughest questions of the candidates. And we make the demand that they don't just sit on a platform and do a rally, come in on the airplane, do a rally, and get out of here without really engaging with the voters. We do exactly what Governor Christie is doing today, standing right here amongst everybody, taking any question unfiltered any time of the day, talking to people one-on-one. And we want to buy off on folks by looking them in the eye first, right? We want to know who you are as a person. We'll get to the policy. It's important. But we got to buy off on you as a person first. And that's why the rest of the country really understands and respects and knows why we go first. But that's our obligation. Are we going to be the state that says the Republican Party is going forward, or are we going to keep living in the past? I mean, we know what happens when you live in the past. You go backwards, you get stuck, the car's stalled. But we live in the United States of America. We're about innovation. We're about the new idea. We're about the next big thing, not yesterday's news. And that's what the rest of the country is looking for, right? Look at the polls for the presidential race here in New Hampshire, and look how hugely they differ from the rest of the country. Because this is where the conversation is happening. This is where the candidates are engaging. And I say it all the time. If you're a Republican in Nebraska, nothing against Nebraska, but your entire experience with the presidential race is only what you see on national news. And I get it. You shouldn't be surprised that Trump is winning. He's the former incumbent president, and his name is said about 157 times by every one of the major networks every night. Maybe the other candidates get one or two mentions. So it shouldn't surprise everyone, but not here. In New Hampshire, everyone's got to earn it, right? And they got to earn it with us. It ain't about how much money you pay. It ain't about how much money you throw to the campaign. It's about how hard they come here and earn it themselves, person to person. I'm obviously very partial to folks that have governor in front of their name. Governors get stuff done, right? They do. We have a lot of great candidates out there, and I'll be on the road with all of them. I was on the road with Governor Burgum and a bunch of others that are coming into the state. But obviously, I'm very partial to governors. And to be very honest, Wayne brought up the fact that I think we are in significantly better shape today than we were back in 2016, right? And we have this great administration. We've been able to do everything to put in the right judges and the right commissioners and, again, kind of get that fiscal responsibility in order, these giant surpluses, while at the same time we're cutting taxes and we're getting rid of regulation, and we're the only state in New England that's actually growing in population. But let me be very honest about why that is. I'm not governor if it's not for this guy. Chris was running the RGA in 2016, and Chris was one of the ones that stepped up and said, we need to put money in New Hampshire because that's a winnable race. Because New Hampshire is not a blue state like everybody thinks. Remember, we had those 20 years where everyone thought we were a blue state, right? And we turned it all around in 2016. We did a great job locally, but nationally, the Republican Governors Association, which Chris was head of at the time, came in and they put some money behind us. They let us control our messaging. They didn't try to take our messaging away. They knew how important a New Hampshire-style candidate and a New Hampshire message was, and we won. And how much did I win by? 16,000 votes. That's nothing. I mean, really, can you imagine where we'd be if there was ever an election where we all learned here in New Hampshire, elections have consequences, right? Who did I run against? It wasn't Phil. Van Osten, right? Colin, imagine Colin Van Osten. Let's be, what did I have to do as a governor? And I'm not just sitting here patting myself on the back, but I just want to reemphasize, elections have consequences. Would have an income tax, because I had to veto it twice when the Democrats put it. Would have license for illegal immigrants, right? Would have absolute open borders. Would have the federal government dictating how our elections are run. You'd have ballot harvesting legalized here. Not only Governor Van Osten, you'd probably have Secretary of State Van Osten by this time, because that's what they went for. They went for the gambit, and we had to hold that back, and we did. And when we showed that not only we could lead and win an election, but we could get results, then we took the House and Senate back in 2020, and we've been able to build on it from there. And what's the story? The story is, yeah, we're the envy of the Northeast right now. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. It's not about Chris Sununu. It's about building a great team. Governors know how to build great teams because every day you got to get something done. Policy's easy. Policy's easy. Look, my 18-year-old, God bless him, he's got great policy ideas. That's not hard. Funding is easy. Well, apparently for Washington, if they want to fund something, they just borrow money from China and they fund it, right? But the real challenge is implementation. When we talk about mental health, when we talk about opioid and treatment and recovery, when we talk about access points for all these systems that you're relying on day to day for your families, right? It's not just up here. It's what's happening every single day in our lives. Governors get that. They engage with constituents. They understand accountability on the hundreds of decisions they have to make every single week. They know how to build teams. And at the end of the day, it's always about going forward, not relitigating the past, right? So that's the opportunity that we have. That's where 49 other states are looking to New Hampshire and saying, what can you guys give us? Filter those other knuckleheads out, whoever the others are. I don't know. They're all great people. Well, most of them. Except the orange-haired elephant in the room. That guy's just got an attitude problem. Look, it's just about going forward. That's the opportunity. I mean, we can sit here all day and make jokes about Trump. I mean, that's easy enough. But really standing with candidates that are going to answer questions, that are going to be accountable, that are going to look you in the eye, they're going to engage with you, they're going to shake your hand and talk to your kids and ask them what's going on in their schools, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. That's all that matters on the ground. So I apologize for the extra long introduction. So it's a good way to pat ourselves on the back for crushing in New Hampshire and remembering that these elections have consequences. So it's not just about what you guys think today. Are you going to talk to your friends? Are you going to talk to your neighbors? Are you going to talk to your coworkers? You're going to take this message further and make sure that we're making sure that all the candidates, all the opportunity is coming to bear, and making sure all these candidates are doing exactly what they need to do. Retail politics. Good retail politics leads to great retail management. And that's what this country needs. This country is begging for good retail management. With that, I'm going to bring forth someone who knows a lot about it. Did an incredible job in New Jersey, has walked in this state, campaigned in this state, I think more than any other human, non-New Hampshire human alive. He was here over 100 days back in 2016. He's crushing it here, putting all his time, putting all his efforts, because he knows the value of New Hampshire citizens, and he's really learning and knowing and now preaching what Live Free or Die is all about. Governor Christie.
Thank you, buddy. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, you got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Let me tell you, Chris is a great name for a great governor. I can tell you that. Our parents knew at the moment we were born. They looked at me and Sununu as we came into the world and said, these guys are going to be great. Let's give them a name that makes it work. I will tell you, I was proud to come up here and campaign for him, because I knew that what he understood is that the only way that you fix problems is to listen to the people who have them and then work as hard as you can to get a result that will make their lives different. He is not only one of the most popular governors in America because of his sterling personality, but it is also because he has told the truth to the people of New Hampshire, and he's delivered on that truth for the people of the state. And so I am really proud that he was willing to come here tonight and give that introduction. I didn't think it was too long. I think you shortened it up for me tonight, and I appreciate that. And I will tell you this. These are the kind of people that we need in Washington, D.C. These are the kind of people, the folks who know how to deliver results, the folks who will block out the noise and put the job first in delivering for all of you. And so I don't know what's going to be next for his career. We haven't talked about that yet. But what I will tell you is I hope that public service remains a part of his career, because what he's done here in New Hampshire, he should be able to help us do for the rest of the country. So thank you, Governor. One other thing before we get going here, let me introduce the person who has put up with me for 37 years of marriage and 2 years of dating before that. We are coming on 40 years together. None of you can believe it. Neither can her family. My amazing wife, Mary Pat Christie. Please stand up, Mary Pat. Mary Pat, while I was standing over there, I met a college classmate of your oldest brother, John, who is here tonight. He's going to come over and see you. Now, you would say, okay, well, that's easy. Mary Pat has 6 older brothers, 2 older sisters, and a younger sister. She's number 9 of 10. Just imagine marrying into that family, everybody. They tell you, the presidency is nothing. It is absolutely nothing compared to getting accepted by the 6 older brothers and her father, and I made it. So I'm ready to work on all of you too. If I got past them, I think I can get past you. I had a great couple of days here in New Hampshire. This is the end of my second day. I am thrilled to be invited here to speak to all of you. And let me tell you why we decided to do this. Because a number of you in this audience were with us 8 years ago. And if you had asked me a year ago if I would be back here again, I would have told you no. But as I watched what was happening as this race was getting started, as the field was coming together, it was literally clear to me that no one in this race was willing to tell you the truth. Everybody was afraid to talk about what is so obvious to me and to so many of you about what needs to happen for our country to get bigger and better and stronger. And that was no one in the field wanted to talk to you about Donald Trump. No one wanted to talk to you about what he failed to do as president. No one wanted to talk to you about what he's done to this country since he lost the election in 2020. No one wanted to talk to you about how he has led our party to loss after loss after loss. But most importantly, no one wanted to talk to you about this one simple idea, that if you get privileged enough to be made president of the United States, your job every day is to put the country before yourself. Every day. So, my old friend Donald was up here yesterday, decided to give a speech over at a high school. And as usual, it's probably about a 90-minute speech. And almost all of it was about his favorite topic, himself. And part of what he says that I love the most now is, I am getting indicted for you. If it wasn't me, they'd be going after you. Have you ever heard a bigger pile of crap in your life? Now, as far as I could tell, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that none of the people in this audience tonight have paid off a porn star to keep quiet about the fact that she had sex with him while he was married so that the country and his wife didn't find out about it prior to the 2016 election. Was there anybody here who did that? All right, you're in the clear. Did any of you take classified documents out of the White House, refuse to give them back for 18 months when the government asked you quietly, politely, nicely to do it, then lie to your lawyers and tell them you had shown them all the documents when you had one of your buddies hiding documents in another part of Mar-a-Lago? And by the way, I'm from New Jersey and I was a prosecutor, so I'm somewhat familiar with organized crime. This caper looks like it was performed by the stupid Corleones, right? I mean, this Walton Outa guy, he's Fredo. You know he is. Running around with the boxes, hiding them in other places. Then you send Fredo down to eliminate the hard drive on the security cameras. Poor Fredo. Now he's charged too. But none of you were involved in that either. Lying to the government, obstructing justice, hiding the documents. None of you were involved in that. I want to make sure. All right. None of you are involved in that. Okay. Now, did any of you invite people to Washington, D.C. on January 6th, tell them it was going to be wild, then give a speech in front of them, in front of the White House, saying the election had been stolen when you knew it hadn't? Did you then tell them that Mike Pence could reverse the election if he only had the guts to do it, even though you know there's no way a vice president can reverse an election result? Did you then tell them, any of you, that you would march up to Capitol Hill with them? No, Donald Trump did that. And of course, in typical Donald Trump fashion, he didn't go. You remember that line in the speech? Let's march up to Capitol Hill and I'll go with you. let me tell you something. I've known him for 22 years. If there's a risk that he will break a fingernail, he's not taking that risk. Gets his manicures done perfectly and doesn't want to break one of those nails. So he went back to the safety of the White House and then sat in the dining room outside the Oval Office and watched people destroy the United States Capitol. And he sat there and did nothing. And when Kevin McCarthy called him and begged him to get on TV and ask the people to leave, he said, you know what, Kevin? They're just more upset about the stolen election than you are. I don't think any of you participated in that. Now, look, the courts will decide whether he's criminally liable, criminally responsible for that. But he's morally responsible. He is morally responsible for what happened on January 6th. And my question for you is, how long are we going to continue to pretend that this is normal? How long are we going to continue to make excuses for him? Excuses. Because that's what he wants you to do. Everything is an excuse. Poor him. He's being picked on. The poor New York City billionaire. Now, let's get to that for a second. He said when he was running for president, and I was there because I was running against him. He said on the stages here in New Hampshire, if you elect me, I will repeal and replace Obamacare. Remember? I remember. And he had a Republican Congress for 2 years, and he didn't do it. And you all know why he failed. Because he couldn't shut his mouth and stop picking on John McCain. Over and over and over and over, saying he wasn't a war hero. Donald Trump couldn't spend 7 minutes in the Hanoi Hilton. Yet he picked on John McCain. And then at the end, whose vote did he need to repeal Obamacare? He needed John McCain's vote. And you remember John McCain, and I had no doubt, I got to know John very well during his campaign. May he rest in peace. He was a wonderful patriot and public servant. He was. But all of you up in New Hampshire got to know him really well. You also know he had about as good a temper as anybody I have ever met in this business, and a long memory. And I was sitting with Mary Pat when we were watching that vote getting ready to happen. And I said to her, there is no chance McCain's voting yes. None. And she said, come on, he campaigned against Obama. He campaigned against Obamacare. I said, no way. He is not giving Trump a win on this after everything Trump's done to him. And John McCain came in and went like that. It's Donald Trump's ego, his narcissism, that cost us the repeal of Obamacare because he put himself before us. Then he said he's going to balance the budget in 4 years because he's a businessman and he knew how to do that. Now, remember, he was a businessman in New Jersey for a long time. I was there. He went bankrupt 3 times with casinos. Now, think about that. Who the hell can't make money with a casino? He's the only man in modern memory that could screw it up so badly that he goes bankrupt 3 times. And that was when there was a monopoly. There were no casinos between Atlantic City, New Jersey, and Reno, Nevada. And he still couldn't make money. But he told us he was going to balance the budget, and we bought it. And what did he do? In 4 years, he added $6 trillion to the national debt. $6 trillion, more than any president in history, even the ones who had 8 years. He ran up more debt in 4 than they ran up in 8. He broke his promise to you there. Then he said, and this was the best promise, right? I'm a builder, and I am going to build a big, beautiful wall across the entire border of the United States and Mexico, and better yet, Mexico is going to pay for it. Well, let's give you an update. 52 miles of new wall were built in 4 years. 52 miles. Now, look, he says, if you give me another chance, I'll finish it. If he does it at the same rate, he only needs 110 more years as president to finish the wall. And we haven't gotten our first peso yet. On the merits, everybody, before you go to any of the character issues, on the merits, he failed us. He didn't repeal Obamacare. He added to the deficit. He didn't reduce it. And he didn't build that wall. And we have those problems down at the border now because without that wall being built, Joe Biden can do whatever he wants to do, and he's doing it. And we're seeing the results of that. With that kind of record, how dare he come back and ask to be president again? Then you add to it the last promise. And you remember this one because he's still making it. He's going to drain the swamp. Here's what he did. He rearranged the swamp. He moved it around a little bit and created some room. And the room he created was for his family. His family on the grift, on your backs. None of us knew that if you donated to Donald Trump's campaign, that one of the things he would do with the money is pay his son's mistress $60,000 to speak 3 minutes at the January 6th rally. Kimberly Guilfoyle, 60 grand for 3 minutes from the donations of middle-class Americans who thought they were donating to help get him reelected president. He paid her with that money. $108,000 to Melania's stylist. And he lists that in the report as political strategy consulting. And the worst one, to his daughter Ivanka and her husband Jared, who I have a bit of experience with, that family. He sent him to the Middle East. Why would you send Jared Kushner to the Middle East when you have Rex Tillerson and Mike Pompeo as secretaries of state? Two incredibly accomplished men. You send him. Why? We found out the answer 6 months after he left office. $2 billion from the Saudis to Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. $2 billion. And because he did all this and more with his family, he's normalizing this conduct. And now we have another president who's doing exactly the same thing and allowing Hunter Biden to run roughshod, making money from foreign governments and selling access to Joe Biden. I got asked today by some reporter, what would you do to make sure that didn't happen? The easy answer would be, don't let my family anywhere near the White House after I win. But that's not what I would do, because I'm a leader and my family respects me and I respect them. And I'd look every one of them in the eye and say, nobody gets a job in this government and nobody makes any money off of what I'm doing for the American people. That will be the rule of my administration. I'm going to end this family grift that's going on. We are not a third world republic. We are the United States of America. And it's time for Donald Trump's family to get off the public dole and go back to New York where they belong. See, because Governor Sununu is right. We've had no time. See, Sununu was leaving, and he said, I heard me say I was right. He was right, and he started walking back. I love that about you. Governor Sununu was right, because they talk all the time about all this stuff on TV. We have no time to talk about the real problems in this country. No time to talk about the fact that a third of our kids don't read at grade level. We need to put parents back in charge of their kids' education so they can decide where they go. Stop having the teachers union decide how education is going to work, and let's have parents put that money in their hands, have them decide where to send their kids to school. We've had no time to talk about the crime that is riddling every city in this country. I will tell you this. I was a prosecutor for 7 years. Before I became governor, I ran the 5th largest office in the entire country. And we knew how to deal with crime in New Jersey because we had plenty of it. And we're proud of it, by the way. We have some of the stupidest criminals in America. We do. Made them easy to catch, made me look really good. But what we're going to do is make sure that we have an attorney general who keeps his or her eye on the ball. And ball number one to hit is to clean up the crime in all of our major cities. People who are committing violent crime belong in jail. And if the local prosecutors aren't willing to do it, the feds under me will come in and do it. We need great cities because if we don't have great cities, we can't have a great country. And I don't want to see what's going on in our cities happen anymore in this country. And we need to talk about that and fix it in the next 4 years. The inflation that all of you have put up with over the last 2.5 years is unacceptable. And it was predictable because Joe Biden was just spending more and more and more money. And he drove that inflation way up. And now everything you pay for is 17% higher than it was when Joe Biden became president. And there's no easy way to fix that, everybody. The only way to fix it is to reduce government spending. And every government program has a constituency. When I became governor of New Jersey, we had an $11 billion deficit on a $29 billion budget. Everybody said the only way to fix it was to raise taxes. And I said, no, I'm not doing it. And we sat down and we eliminated 836 individual programs, line by line, to bring the budget into balance. And we kept it in balance for the next 7 years after that, because we only increased spending 2% a year every year for 8 years that I was governor. And we need to bring that type of discipline back. And it's not going to be popular at times. There's going to be some programs we're going to get rid of that some people like. But I'd rather have you be able to afford to put food on your table, to pay for the roof over your head, to help your children with their education, than to have that money be wasted and spent in Washington, D.C. And you need somebody who's done it before and who knows how to do it and who is unafraid to do it. I've done it in New Jersey, and I'm unafraid to do it again in Washington, D.C., and that is what we'll do. And lastly, then I'm going to take your questions. I went to Ukraine last week. And I went to Ukraine because I think it's symbolic of what the foreign policy challenge of the next 50 years is going to be. Because that war is between Ukraine and Russia. But let me tell you, the war is really it's a proxy war between the United States and China. China is funding the Russians by buying their oil. China is buying them weapons from Iran and North Korea. China is trying to see how we'll react. This is a test case for them to go and try to take Taiwan. It is the test case. But it's a test case that we can win without the loss of one American life. Not one. Because when I went to Ukraine last week, I sat for an hour with President Zelensky, and he made it very clear, I do not want one American man or woman on the ground in Ukraine. All I want is for you all to help me win this with the weapons that you have and I don't. Just to give you an example of how outgunned they are and how amazing what they've accomplished already is. The average day in Ukraine, the Russian army shoots 56,000 artillery shells into Ukraine. 56,000 a day. The Ukrainians have 6,000 to shoot back a day. Despite being outgunned nearly 11-1, they've driven the Russians out of most of the areas of Ukraine. And now they want to take back the rest of their land. And it's not just about that. Let me tell you what I saw in the city of Busha. In the city of Busha, we saw that the Russian army went door to door. They dragged men out of their homes, while alive, gouged their eyes out, cut their ears off, and then tied their hands behind their back and shot them in the back of the head in front of their families. And then they went back in those homes and they raped the women who were in those homes. And then they took the dead bodies and they put them in a shallow grave behind the biggest church in Busha. 160 dead civilians in that shallow grave behind St. Michael's Cathedral. And they ransacked the church, took everything out of the church. What's left there now are photographs. They put the photographs of the atrocities the Ukrainians did, pictures taken by Reuters to show what happened. And the worst picture I saw was of a 10-year-old girl who was shot dead on the street of Busha by a Russian soldier. She was laying on the ground, and in her hand still was a leash. that was attached to her dog who was also killed. This was a 10-year-old girl out walking her dog, and she was killed by these barbaric Russian soldiers. I want you to understand that that's a fight that America has never walked away from. These are freedom-loving people who just want to live their lives in a democratic society like we do. And Vladimir Putin, who Donald Trump calls brilliant and a great leader, is the person who's doing this in Ukraine. We need to supply them with the arms they need to win their war. We need to do that. And the first thing that President Zelensky said to me when I walked into the room and shook his hand, and you know, when you shake someone's hand, you know that there's a certain amount of time you shake it and then you pull away, right? And you can't time it. You never do. You can't say to your kids, remember, it's 6 seconds, and then you pull. You just do it, and you know, you learn intuitively. He would not let go of my hand. And he said, Governor, I want you to promise me you'll say one thing to the American people when you get back. And I said, yes, sir, Mr. President. What do you want me to say? And he said, how much we appreciate what the American people have already done for us. This is a man who appreciates that America is standing up for freedom and liberty and democracy and standing with them. When the Russians invaded, Joe Biden called and offered him a plane for he and his family. And Zelensky said, I don't need a plane, Mr. President. I need guns. That's a leader who loves his country and is willing to sacrifice his own life for his country. Let's make him a winner and send a message to China and Russia and Iran and North Korea that you do not tread on America or its friends, not ever. And I have a message for Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. This is not a territorial dispute. A territorial dispute is when someone comes to your home to survey your property. And they come back to you and they say, bad news, your fence is 10 inches on your neighbor's property. That's a territorial dispute. Rolling tanks and guns and missiles into somebody's country and killing innocent civilians is not a territorial dispute. It's an authoritarian act of barbarism that America has never stood for, and I hope in my life will never stand for. Never. All right, so it is time for the fun part of this show, which is for you to ask me questions and for me to try to give you answers. Now, there is an absolutely wild young man who is here tonight who shows up at every town hall for every one of these candidates, although you weren't there last night. And I said, I'm so glad you didn't come last night to Colby Sawyer College. It shows me your mother still has an ounce of sanity left. You haven't driven her so completely nuts that you made her drive you all the way up there. You're not getting the first question, but you will get one, okay? Here are the only rules that go here. You raise your hand, I call on you. You ask me whatever question you want. Someone will bring you a microphone so the cameras can hear you and everybody else can hear you. And we'll see how well we can do in making sure that we bring some New Jersey directness to your questions tonight. So who wants to start? Yes, sir, right there. And here comes your microphone.
Two quick things. I just want to tell you, Governor, I had the honor of being in Ukraine myself in April and in the town of Bucha and at the mass grave. And you are absolutely right. The idea that any American politician can say anything good about Vladimir Putin and not stand with free people trying to defend their lives is sickening to me. Second point, Mr. Trump yesterday made some insults about you, his way, your weight, etc. I'm sure you're a tough guy, you can take it. But next time you come back, maybe Mary Pat says it. I can't take a criticism seriously from a guy who spends more time every morning on his hair and makeup than Nancy Pelosi.
I thank you for the first part. about Ukraine because you're right. And unless you're there, it's hard to completely understand it. And I'm glad that you could verify what I saw with my own eyes last Friday. And as to the second part, let me just say this. He's a big talker when we're a few miles away from each other. He's got a lot to say when he's got a phone in his hand, posting something on social media. We're going to know what he's really made of if we see whether he shows up 2 weeks from tonight or not on that stage. Because I'll tell you one thing for sure. I will be there, and I am waiting for him, and then we'll answer him. Because where I grew up and the way I was raised was a man who has something to say to another man, comes up to him and looks him in the eye and says it to him. And a coward does the opposite. So we'll see if the coward shows up 2 weeks from tonight in Milwaukee, but I will be there. Yes, ma'am. Microphone coming right there.
Welcome back to New Hampshire. It's great to see you.
Good to be back.
Okay. I'm a Jewish American, incidentally of Ukrainian ancestry. My grandparents came in 1888. And like every other Jew in this country right now, we are really concerned about this rapid rise of anti-Semitism and hate. And I would like to know what a Christie administration is going to do to address hate in this country.
Well, I'm concerned about it too. Because when Donald Trump spoke after the Charlottesville incident in 2017 and said there are good people on both sides, sorry, they're not. If you're a white nationalist, you're not a good person. If you're a Nazi, you're not a good person. And so the first thing a president can do is to be unequivocal about that. To say that every person in this country is one of God's creatures and is an individual gift from God. And every one of those lives deserves to be respected, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, their religion, their gender, their sexual orientation. Regardless of any of that, it must first start with respect. And one of the ways he failed our country is to show no respect for those who disagree with him. Look, I disagree with lots of people lots of times, and you've seen it. And I'm not afraid to disagree with someone. But you do it respectfully. And that doesn't mean you don't yell. Sometimes you have to yell. Sometimes you have to get angry. I'm okay with all that. But in the end, it must come from a place of respect. That's the first thing. The second thing is to make sure that the Attorney General of the United States understands that any acts of bias, anti-Semitism, or any other type of bias in this country are unacceptable. And the people who commit them need to be held to account for that. Because if we set those examples, we have a chance of deterring that conduct. And the third thing is that I want to try to end the era of useless anger in this country. There are politicians in this race who are using anger to only advance their own prospects. They want to create something for you to be angry about, tell you why you should be angry about it, and then explain to you why they're the person who can fix what you're angry about. But then they move immediately from that to the next thing to make you angry about. And by the way, the proof of what I'm saying as I'm saying it is that joker out there who keeps screaming and yelling. And I think it's great because what he's got out there is a Trump 2020 sign. I'm all for it. Keep him in 2020. Get him the hell out of 2024. Oh, no, in the back. Hold on 1 sec. He'll get you the microphone. He's coming right around. Look at what a great job.
I read your book and I loved it. And apparently 50 million people in America still believe Trump on the last election. Now, some of these people are conspiracy theorists and are not going to change their mind. but a lot of them are not. They just haven't looked at the numbers. They don't know the nuances of the election, demographics, state by state, voting patterns. Can you get on, when you get Trump on stage, can you show his ignorance of the actual numbers and where they came from?
Remember, I'm only going to have about 10 or 11 minutes,
Right.
probably. So you're giving me the challenge of showing Donald Trump's ignorance with only 11 minutes. I'm good, but I'm not that good. But look, here's the bottom line on the election. I have no problem with the fact that Donald Trump wanted to contest the election. That is his right as a candidate to do. And he filed 61 lawsuits across the country and went 0 for 61. I mean, just by accident, you should be able to win one if you file 61. 0 for 61. And you saw the numbers in the book I went through in some great specificity in the book about Pennsylvania, Michigan, the places where he said the election was stolen, where it is so clear that it wasn't, that it's just laughable. Let me tell you what he said to me one time, and to Mary Pat. He said to us, you know, and this, he was talking about having an argument with your spouse. That was the context of it. And he said to Mary Pat, remember something, Mary Pat, if you're arguing with Chris. If you say something enough times, whether it's true or not, it becomes true. She looked at him and she said, I wish I would have known that. I would have won a lot more arguments over the last 35 years. He believes that. And unfortunately, a lot of Americans believed it, because that's why I broke from him on election night 2020 permanently and forever. Because when the man who's president of the United States stands behind the seal of the presidency in the East Room of the White House and tells the American people the election was stolen, they believe he knows something. They believe, well, he's president of the United States. He must know something we don't know. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But we shouldn't have. And I knew that night that he didn't know anything. And I knew, because I had prepared him for those debates, that he was scared in September and October that he was going to lose. He knows he lost. Now, I understand that if I lost to Joe Biden, who's never beat anybody outside the state of Delaware in his entire life, I'd be pretty depressed too. But that's the way this business works. The only way we're going to fix this is, I'm not going to have enough time to go through all the statistics with people, but we have to just continue to tell the truth. The truth is not negotiable, and the truth matters. It matters. And so, as Governor Sununu said, when people talk about the polls right now and all the rest of it, let me tell you a few things. This is not going to happen like this. This guy's been at the front of the American consciousness for 8 years. The media is obsessed with him. They can't talk about anything else. And so for us to break through, it's going to take patience and persistence. But let me tell you something. I got a lot of persistence, and I'm working on the patience part. All right? And we're going to do it. Right back there. Yes, ma'am. Here comes Tom with the microphone for you.
Thank you. Rose Daly, Epping, New Hampshire. I'm going to describe a young couple, 26, 27, married, took out loans to put themselves through college, knew that they had to pay those loans back. Nothing's free. They are planning to relocate from New Hampshire. No reflection on Governor Sununu, but on the weather, which apparently he couldn't fix. Both were in public service. The young man was a corrections officer during the pandemic. The young woman had a biochem degree and recently finished her second degree as a nurse and is now an RN. She's trying to obtain employment, which she actually did secure today. It's going to become obvious who these people are to me. And while she was looking for a nursing job, I said to her, why don't you check out a school, be a school nurse? And she looked at me and said, Mom, I can't imagine the thought of triaging children who have been shot. And that's a reality. That's what our young people face. That's what parents face when they send their children off to school. How can we stop this? How can we stop this madness?
Well, it is an extraordinarily good question with not a lot of great answers. So first off, I'm not going to stand up here and tell you, oh, just elect me and I'll solve that problem for you, because we've had too much of that in this country. Look, we have two things at real tension with each other. We have the concern that we all have about senseless, wanton violence happening anywhere, but most particularly against our children. We also have a Second Amendment in this country which needs to be respected, like all the other amendments are respected, because when we start to dispose of one of them, then we're going to start to dispose of all of them. And I can't be for that. But I think we all understand that the issue of mental health is integral to this. And I know Governor Sununu has done as much or more than any governor in the country in putting more money and more time and effort behind making mental health treatment more available. And we need to do that for the entire country, because this is a disease, just like cancer or heart disease or diabetes, yet we stigmatize it and we make people afraid to come out and admit they have a problem and they need help. And so first we have to lower that stigma and make treatment much more broadly available, so that not only the person who has a mental illness can access it, but also that their family members can feel free to come forward and try to get them the help that they need. We also know that there are laws in place that can help to stop this, but we don't enforce them. And we need to enforce the ideas that people need to apply for gun permits, and that they need to be honest in what they say on those gun permits. Because if we don't, then we're just making a mockery of the law. The third thing I tell you is that I do believe we need to get realistic about security at schools. And there are systems available to be able to lock down schools much more quickly, remotely. There are ways that we can have security folks in the schools that we need to. It's a horrible reality to have to think about those things. But the worst reality is watching body bags being taken out of schools, little body bags. And so those are three places that I would start. But also, we need to have a country, again, as I talked about, that lowers the anger. Because I do believe that some of this comes from that. Comes from it. And there are plenty of reasons for us to be angry about things that the government does or that people within our country do. But when we resort to violence to deal with that, or that anger comes so heavy that our violence becomes wanton and misdirected, we're contributing to that problem. And so I would tell you, the first town hall I did in this campaign was on CNN. And one of the men who came and questioned me was a guy who lost his son in the Las Vegas concert shooting. And I said to him that night, I need to tell you that those are my answers, but I feel wholly inadequate when standing in front of someone who lost their son. Because I can't imagine having 4 children of my own, being able to put one foot in front of the other after a tragedy like that. And so we need to open our hearts to all this too, and feel that and express it, so that maybe we can stop that person before they start. So those are the ways I look at it. It's not a perfect answer. I don't think it brings a complete solution, but I think it's a start. We have to acknowledge that with each other and get to work on mental health, most particularly in this country. But thank you for asking that question. I really appreciate it. All right, Quinn, your time. The most famous 15-year-old in New Hampshire. This guy is on like every cable news channel, getting after candidates for president of the United States in town halls all over. People are giving him all the credit and the fame. I give it to his mother, who continues to indulge him in ways that I know are going to someday make him governor or senator from this state. I can't wait till I'm old enough that he does that, and I'm sitting somewhere in New Jersey watching TV and seeing Governor or Senator Quinn, and I will be completely unsurprised. What is your question tonight, young man?
Well, I don't know how I can top that.
Good, then
So,
sit down.
I'm not going to try. All right. So thank you, Governor.
You're welcome, sir.
You will be happy to know that I'm throwing you a softball tonight compared to my other questions.
What did I do to deserve such great treatment?
Well, I watched like every single podcast interview, a lot of interviews, and your town hall last night. I watched all way too long of it, and you didn't really. You gave me a few ideas, but nothing I could really capitalize on.
All right.
So
Let her rip. Let's see.
yeah.
What
All
do you
right.
got?
So unfortunately, my first experience with you and my exposure to you came when my sisters were watching Triumph the Insult Dog.
Oh, that's not good.
And I never really like I mean the dog is hilarious, but that specific segment I didn't like because I don't like attacks on anybody's appearance, and I think Triumph and Trump are very similar in that fashion.
It's true.
It is true. And I have noticed that you attack Trump very, very harshly, deserve some of the time. And when you attack, his most energetic supporters take it very personally. And are you worried that this back and forth banter could hurt the country, considering that we know riling up the Trump mob can be literally deadly? And I'm even getting considered like walking through the parking lots at this event, Pence and you particularly. And I mean, to peel away these Trump voter, don't tell me there's not a Trump voter.
He's already like responding to my answer before I give it. Get to the question, dude. Let's
well,
go.
Okay. Well, I was thinking about what we were going to say, and you were saying,
Come
well,
on. I know.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right. So I know these people. They would go to hell and back with them. I know a lot of them. I'm good friends with some of them. And could you consider taking a page from a book that you might not be naturally inclined to do so? When they go low, you go high. Thank you.
No. And let me tell you why. Because we tried that with him in 2016. All of us ignored his insults. Me, Jeb, Marco, John Kasich, Ted, Carly, Ben Carson. We all ignored his insults in 2016, and we said, we're not going to respond to that. We're going to go high and talk about other things and just let him do what he's going to do, because no one will believe him. No one's going to believe he'll actually build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. No one's going to believe him that he's actually going to balance the budget in 4 years. No one's going to believe it. Guess what? Lots of people did. You have to fight him on the truth. When he lies, we need to fight him, because to ignore him is to assent to his lies. And I'm not doing that. I'm not going to do it anymore, Quinn. And here's the thing. I can't worry about them either. I can't worry about what's dangerous. It's dangerous to run for president. It is. And you got to buy that when you decide to do it. And if I'm angering some people, that's the way it goes. That's part of the business. If your principles aren't worth fighting for, then don't fight for them. Stay on the bench. But if you're going to get off the bench, I got off the bench halfway 8 years ago. And I didn't do everything that in my mind and my heart I wanted to do, because I was making a political calculation when you were just suggesting, well, if these people are so entrenched with him and they're going to go to hell and back with him, and you maybe need them to vote for you at some point, maybe you should just back off a little bit. Let me tell you, I tried it. It doesn't work. And when he says the stuff he said about me yesterday, don't let it bother you for a minute. I don't care. Like, it's not like, this has been going on my entire political career. When I ran for governor against John Corson in 2009, he ran a TV commercial that said, Christie is throwing his weight around. Very subtle. right? And what I said at the time, Wolf Blitzer had me on CNN, and he said to me, "What do you think of the commercial?" And I said, "Wolf, it's really moved me. I'd like to make a confession to everyone that's watching. I'm somewhat overweight." Newsflash to New Jersey and America, right? Quinn, who cares? Here's what you should care about. I've never pretended to be anything than what I am. I've never pretended to be anything than what I am. And if you're looking for the perfect candidate, you're not going to find him or her. They don't exist. And I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to tell you what I think. And that's either going to get your vote. Well, not you, because you can't vote. But that's either going to get all the rest of these people's votes, or it's not. But I am not going to trade away the truth. Not because they yell in the parking lot, not because he's a child who isn't worthy of being in grades 4 below yours with some of the comments he's made. And so I let that piece of it roll off my back, but not the stuff that affects our country, man. The stuff that affects our country, I'm not going to let him get away with it anymore. Not going to do it. Yes, ma'am, in the back. That's you. They'll come at you. Tom, I'm trying to pick from opposite sides so I can just watch you run each way.
I was at your town hall 8.5 years ago, the last town hall before the New Hampshire primary. And within the next 48 hours, you lost the primary and you endorsed Donald Trump.
I did.
It felt like a betrayal to those of us who believed you then.
Yep,
You went on to work with him for the next 4 years.
I did.
Why should we vote for you now?
It's a good question. You know, when the New Hampshire primary was over and I dropped out, and then the South Carolina primary was over and he won again, I became completely convinced, and I turned out to be right, that he was going to be the nominee. And the one thing that I was completely committed to was I didn't want Hillary Clinton to be president of the United States. I didn't want it. And so, as a result, I said this to David Cameron about 8 years ago, the former prime minister of Great Britain. I was over on a visit to him, and he asked me while I was governor, explain your system of electing a president. I don't get it. We have a campaign for 48 days here in Great Britain. It starts, it ends, it's over. What is going on with you people? And I said to him, look, this is what you need to understand about American presidential politics. You don't always get to vote for who you want to vote for. You get to vote for who's left. Who was left in 2016 was Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And so my view was, because I'd known him at that time for 14 years, that I probably had a chance to have more influence over him than anybody else, to try to make him a better candidate and make him a better president. And so that's what I tried to do. Turns out I was wrong. I can't put it to you any other way than that. I was wrong. I was wrong because I thought that I could make him better, but I couldn't. And I didn't want Hillary Clinton to be president. I'm not regretful of that. I think she would have been a horrible president. And I think she would have done horrible things to the country. But so I don't regret siding with him in 2016. And believe me, by the time I endorsed him, whether people believed it or not, it was over. John or Marco or Ted were not beating him. Jeb dropped out after South Carolina. It was John, Marco, Ted, and him. I'd been on that stage with those guys. None of them were beating him. It was over. So now it was time for me, I thought, to try to make our Republican nominee the best person he could be. But remember, too, over the 4 years that he was president, I never accepted a job in the administration. He offered me Secretary of Homeland Security. He offered me Secretary of Labor. He offered me White House Chief of Staff. And I turned all of them down. And the reason I did was because I knew I couldn't work for him. But he was the president. And he's the only president we had. So I was still going to try to do the best I could to be helpful where I could. But I was not going to go and work in his administration. And in 2020, I didn't think we could have a worse choice than Hillary and Trump. Then we have Biden and Trump, who literally, physically didn't look up to the job for me. And so I helped Trump again. And when you look at how Biden's performed as president, I don't know, jump ball. So I was put forth a bunch of imperfect choices. And I guess what I could have done was just sit it out and not do anything. But I didn't do that. But the big mistake I made, the place where I was the most wrong, was that I thought I could help change him. And so did Bill Barr, and so did Mike Pompeo, and so did Rex Tillerson and Jim Mattis and Mark Esper and Mick Mulvaney and Reince Priebus and John Kelly, like some really great Americans who also thought, just get in there, we can make him better. We can't. He's unsalvageable. He's irretrievable. And so the reason you should vote for me this time is I'm smarter than I was 8 years ago. Smarter. We got it, guys? Try it again. No? Here. Take mine.
Thank you. My name is Julie Smiley. I am from Amherst, New Hampshire, and I'm also the state manager for Save the Children's Action Network. So I'm here today to ask you a question about food insecurity in America. With millions of children in the US still going hungry, how will you make nutritious food more accessible for children and families in the US?
The shame of that question is that in a country as bountiful and plentiful as ours is, that there are still children who do go to bed every night hungry. And with the programs that we have that our government, both at the federal and state level, run, like the food stamp program and others, that we still have that problem. I think the only way we're going to do it is to take part of it out of the government's hands. The government has shown itself unable to solve this problem, and take some of the money that we're spending with the government and give it to the nonprofit groups who do this so much better. I watched in my own state, the Community Food Bank of New Jersey, which does an extraordinary job of privately raising funds. They get some government money, but not much. Most of it's all philanthropic donations. And they make sure that food gets out, and all different kinds of food get out to the people in our state who need it the most. We have another nonprofit in New Jersey called America's Grower Row, where these are folks who set up farms in their backyards, and some of them even bigger farms, and they donate all the fresh produce to nonprofits who work with those who go to bed hungry at night. And they do an extraordinary job. And I really think that we can't take all of it out of the government's hands, but I think we have to take part of it out and give it to nonprofits who are out there on the ground, closer to people than the federal government is, to be able to identify those problems, those areas that need the most help, and to be able to distribute the food in that way. Because we have more than enough food to feed every American in this country and a good part of the rest of the world. And we're failing at it, and it's unacceptable. So that's the way I would do it. But thank you for your question.
Thank you. Governor, thank you so much. I'm a proud Republican. I believe in, generally speaking, the Republican platform. And frankly, in my opinion, most of the candidates, not surprisingly, unsurprisingly, stay within the goalposts of what that platform is. Policy will come and go. It's very hard to differentiate one candidate from the other on policy. What I'm going to vote for, the person I'm going to vote for, is the person that I believe can actually move beyond just talking about policy to actually getting things done. We're in my opinion, a zero-sum game right now with parties just vying against each other and nothing actually happening for us. The first president that meant something to me as a young person was Ronald Reagan, who famously worked with Tip O'Neill. Clearly, two people who are on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Can you give me an example, since you have had the experience of sitting in an executive office, of when you had to work with someone that you were probably not on the same page with, but were able to get something done for the people of New Jersey?
Every day. I had a Democratic legislature for 8 years, every day of my 8 years. I'll give you the first story on this. I get elected governor. There's going to be a new Senate president, Democrat, and they had a 24-16 advantage in the Senate, so one close. His name is Steve Sweeney. And Steve was the president of the Iron Workers Union in New Jersey, so another shy and retiring guy like me. And midway through my transition, The minute you get elected, you get state troopers that take you around. And that morning I said to the state troopers, it wasn't on my schedule. I said, take me down to the Senate President's office. The Senate President's office is about 2.5 hours from my home in New Jersey. And they said, well, it's not on the schedule, sir. We haven't advanced it. And I said, I can pretty much guarantee you no one's looking to kill me down there. So let's just go ahead and roll the dice and take a chance. So we went down to Steve's office unannounced. I walked in the front door of his office and his assistant nearly fell over. And she said, Governor-elect, do you have an appointment? And I said, no, I was in the neighborhood. I just decided to stop by. And she said, well, the Senate President's not expecting you. And I said, I know, but do you think he might have a couple minutes for me? So let me see. And so she went back. And out came Steve, really embarrassed because he had just gotten back from the gym. He wasn't expecting anybody. He was in a T-shirt and sweatpants and sneakers. He said, Governor-elect, like, what are you doing here? And I said, I was in the neighborhood. I thought I'd stop by. He goes, your neighborhood's 2.5 hours away. What are you doing here? I said, I want to talk to you. Let's go in your conference room. When in the conference room, I said, look, Steve, I said, we can yell and scream at each other and one-up each other in the media for the next 8 years. And he said, 4 years. I said, 8 years. And I said, or we could put touchdowns in the end zone. I want to know what you're willing to do because I want to put touchdowns in the end zone. And the promise I will make to you is if you shake my hand today and say that's what you want to do, then I will never lie to you and I will never break my word to you. Whether a deal I make turns out to be to my advantage or my disadvantage, I will hold to my word. And he sat there, he looked out the window for a second, he looked back at me, and he stood up and he put his hands out. He said, let's put touchdowns in the end zone. And for the next 8 years, we didn't always get along. Believe me, there was one time on the front page of the Sunday paper, the headline was, Sweeney, I want to punch Christie in the head. So it wasn't always, flowers and wine and candy, but we got a lot done. For instance, we reformed the public pension system together, saved $120 billion for New Jersey taxpayers when the public sector unions were protesting against both of us. We did that. We fired the entire Camden City Police Department because it was the most dangerous city in America and they weren't doing their jobs. And we won in court and we started a whole new police department, a county department with a metro division, went from 300 cops to 400 for the same price. And 10 years later, crime and murder in particular in Camden is down 75%. We merged our college universities into our medical schools. We upped the number of grants that those schools got from 55th in the country to 20th. And it's now one of the top 20 medical schools in the country at Rutgers University. All those things were wildly opposed at the time and were bipartisan accomplishments. The bottom line is that it's harder to hate up close. And that's what I determined by making that first meeting. And the governor or the president has to make that move. I used to say in Trenton, the three most important numbers were 41, 21, and 1. 41 to get something passed in the lower house, 21 in the Senate, and 1 to get the governor's signature. I loved being 1. But when you are 1, you have to take the responsibility for bringing people together. You can't count on members of the legislature, as good intentioned as they may be, to do that on their own. You're the person who was elected statewide. You're the person who has the responsibility to put your political capital on the line to do it. I spent more time with people I couldn't stand than I can count. But that was my job because they got elected too. And my first vote was for Ronald Reagan. I turned 18 in September of 1980, and I voted for him by absentee ballot in my dorm room at the University of Delaware. And it's the proudest vote I've ever made in my life. And remember, back in the late 70s, what we were like: hostages in Iran, Soviets in Afghanistan, inflation, unemployment, Olympic boycotts, and the president of the United States blamed us. And what we did at a time that's very like what we're going through today, we turned to a Republican governor in a blue state who was forced to understand and learn how to craft compromise. Ronald Reagan didn't learn how to do that with Tip O'Neill. He learned how to do that with Jesse Unruh in California. And he brought those skills to Tip O'Neill, and they did it together. And if you elect me president of the United States, I will do exactly the same thing that Ronald Reagan did. Use the bully pulpit to persuade, and then sit down and don't let the perfect get in the way of the good, and start making progress for this country again. I'm tired of arguments and anger that lead to nothing but more arguments and anger. I want those arguments to lead to accomplishments for the American people. That's what I did as the governor of New Jersey, and that is what I will do as president of the United States if you give me the chance. All right, I got 2 more questions that I can do. Let's go to the gentleman here in the green shirt.
Thank you, Governor Christie, for your courage and leadership. I guess this question is really about getting off the bench. I'm from Massachusetts, so forgive me for that. But I'm a supporter of yours, contributor your money, and I have a strong core of friends, individuals, 20 friends or so. They're very disappointed in Biden. They can't stand Trump. But I'm having trouble getting them off the bench, maybe because Massachusetts is not as relevant as New Hampshire. So what is your view looking at the country and good people who can really make a difference who aren't there yet? What more can we do? And what's your insight to when things are really going to break open for these individuals to really step forward?
The only thing it takes for the bad people to win is for the good people to stay silent. That's it. And I have to tell you, if they're not moved by what's happened already, I'm worried about them. And look, it's my obligation to motivate them. Leaders shouldn't follow polls, they should change them. And that's what I'm in the process of doing. And it's not going to happen overnight. But if they really are disappointed in Joe Biden, as I think they should be, and if they are completely disillusioned with Donald Trump, which I think they should be, well, then what the hell are they going to do? Sit home and do nothing and moan and complain? Well, then I don't have time for that. I'm going to keep talking to them, though. And I'm going to keep pushing them. And what everybody here can do, in New Hampshire, you see, you are the blessed people. Take it from a guy from Massachusetts and a guy from New Jersey. You are the blessed people because you have an opportunity to actually change things. And let me predict for you what can happen here. I will never be ahead in one poll in New Hampshire in this race. Now, remember, I started at 0. I'm now at 11. I'm tied for second place with Governor DeSantis. And so we've made some progress. We made some progress in 2 months. In 2 months. But it's not enough. When your friends ask you, well, why the hell should I support Christie? He can't win. You tell him he won't be ahead in one poll until election night in New Hampshire. Not one. But remember, in that last poll, Donald Trump's at 34%. That means 66% of New Hampshire Republicans today, before the campaign has even really started, don't want Donald Trump. When I get going, you think that's going to get better or get worse for Donald Trump? I guarantee it's going to get worse. And it's not just me doing it. He's doing it. He's his own worst enemy. He can't shut his mouth. See? And so my advice to you is to say to those friends, stop trying to predict who the president's going to be. We stink at it. We never get it right. Remember, 8 years ago at this time, the prohibitive frontrunners for the Republican nomination were President Jeb Bush and President Scott Walker, home now in Florida and Wisconsin, respectively. Okay? We're not good at making these predictions. So how about you say to these friends, why don't you decide who you want to be president and then get off your rear ends and try to make that happen? This is the only country in the world where that can really happen. And this is the state in the country that can get it rolling. And I will guarantee you this. If on primary night here in New Hampshire, I beat Donald Trump, and I think I will, the world will be shocked. There will be stunning headlines all over the world. But those of you who are here tonight can say, oh my God, he predicted it. And then let me tell you what happens the day after. The day after, that rotted building with the nice facade that is Donald Trump, when that facade gets broken through by the people of New Hampshire, the building will collapse. You will end his career in New Hampshire in January of 2024. That's what you tell them. See if they want to do that or not. I will end with you, ma'am. And here comes Tom with your
I
microphone.
can talk pretty loudly.
There you go. Now we're going to give you one of those.
Okay. I'm going to preface with, I am a senior loan officer. I've been writing residential mortgages for 24 years. And the conversation that I'm having on a weekly basis are people calling me up saying, my landlord is selling the building because he can get a ton of money for it. I can't find a place to rent. I want to buy something, maybe $150,000. In my mind, I know it doesn't exist unless you're going to go up to Colebrook or Berlin or something. But I still go through the application process because that's our job. And the conversation I'm having is, do you have family members you can move in with? Do you have friends that maybe the 2 or 3 of you can rent something together? And it's getting harder and harder. At this point, my sister lost her husband during COVID to cancer. She just moved in with me because she could not afford to live on her own. I have 2 sisters in their 60s living with my mother because they cannot afford to live on their own. With the interest rates rising, I did a mortgage for a young lady. When we started, it was 3 1/4. A year later, when she finally won a contract, it was 7 1/4. And her payments were $340 a month more with the same property taxes. Something's got to give because we were serving 60 people in the soup kitchen. Now we're doing over 100. This crocheting that you've seen me doing all night, we're trying to get 150 scarves so that people who come to the soup kitchen get one gift this Christmas. And I've made 120. So our goal is 150. But this is what's happening. And I don't know what to do. I don't know what to tell these people anymore.
Well, look, this is what happens when government spends too much money and interest rates go up. Some people think that interest rates only affect the wealthy, the investor class. They don't. Interest rates affect everyone. And most harshly and most particularly, those who are trying to get into their first home. Those who are trying to make sure that they have a place where their family can comfortably and safely live. The crime of high interest rates is the stealing of hope from people who are not looking to be rich. They're just looking to be safe. And so that's why we have to reduce government spending. If we reduce government spending, I guarantee you interest rates will go down. They will. And when they do, you're going to be able to give people mortgages again at 3%, 2%, because interest rates will be down that low again. And they can have a better chance at affording that. Not everybody will. So that's part of the answer. The second part of the answer is that we have to spend more time on encouraging private developers to develop affordable housing. Because not, like you said, 150,000. It's not going to get anybody anything that they can live in here in this part of New Hampshire. And so we need to make sure that we have a little bit of more of that available in addition to making it more affordable to borrow the money that needs to be borrowed to be able to get yourselves someplace that you can live, that your family can feel safe, secure, and comfortable. The crime of interest rates is to have people now paying 7.5% interest because that's what the market requires. They can't get there. And whether it's an older person who leaves their apartment and needs to try to find a place to live, or it's a young person starting their lives, wanting to start a family, I can't find a place to live. It's not what America's all about. And that's what Joe Biden has done to this country. Look, I said a lot of tough things about Donald Trump tonight and Joe Biden, but I will say this about Joe Biden. He told us he was going to bring the country together and he was going to govern as a moderate. And instead, what he did was run to the left and go as far left as he could. And what that did, by spending all that money that the liberals wanted him to spend, was it jacked up interest rates because of the inflation. And that was the only tool we had to try to bring inflation down so people could afford to buy a dozen eggs or half a gallon of milk. And that's the battle we're in right now, and he caused it. Of course. And why is fuel up? Fuel is up because of inflation also. Fuel is up because he also has said that he doesn't want us to be energy independent. He's not allowing further exploration of natural gas and oil. We're buying it. If you can imagine this, Joe Biden would rather buy this from the Venezuelans and the Saudis than from North Dakota. Makes no sense. And governors like the governor of New York is blocking pipelines that could bring natural gas to New Hampshire and make heating your home more affordable. Craziness. And you need a president who's going to swipe away the craziness and say, we want to make this a country, first and foremost, where people can live safely, securely, and comfortably. And housing is a big part of that. Energy costs are a big part of that, and food costs are a big part of that. And if we don't get that trifecta right, we're ill-serving the people of this country. Thanks for doing those scarves. That's a pretty cool idea. Let me end with this, because the former Speaker of the House is here. Donna, these lights are right in your eyes. I'm trying to figure out a way to block them for you, but even I'm not big enough to block those lights. So I can't. So I want to end this before it gets dark. First, thank you to all of you for coming out here and being willing to listen. Governor Sununu is right. New Hampshire not only has a role, but a responsibility. If Donald Trump is the Republican nominee, and he's the Republican nominee because he won New Hampshire, then we have no one else to look at but ourselves. That's it. We do not want him to get on a roll again like he did 8 years ago. His roll started right here. He lost Iowa. His first win was here. Let us make this his last loss in January. And I want to be president because this country needs to do the big things again. We are fighting over things that are so small, so small. And by small, I don't mean unimportant. There are small things that are important, but they're not the things that, in my view, should dominate a presidential race. And you know, the kind of things that can make you angry. But when we have a candidate who thinks that Mickey Mouse is a greater threat than Vladimir Putin, that's a problem. That's a problem. I want to do the big things like this country has always done. You see, every time we were at a crossroads like this in our country's history, we had leaders who inspired us to go big. 1776, if you took a poll, independence would not have won. People were afraid of the British Army. They were fearful they'd lose their homes, they'd lose their families. But people like Washington and Jefferson and Adams, Hamilton, Franklin said, no, we can do better, and we will do better. And because they were willing to inspire us to sacrifice, we had a country. Benjamin Franklin said to a woman in Philadelphia after the Constitution, she said, Mr. Franklin, what type of government did you give us? And he said, a republic, if you can keep it. 1860, Abraham Lincoln was confronted with the question of whether or not to separate our country in two. The easiest thing to do for him would have been to let the South go. But he said, no, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And more American men died in that war than in any war we've ever had, a war against each other. But he stood up and he inspired us to greater things. And when he was done with that war, America was bigger and stronger and freer than it was before. And in 1941, Franklin Roosevelt did not say this is Europe's problem and Asia's problem. He said America will be the arsenal of democracy. And he led us to sacrifice greatly with lives of American men and fortune and comfort. But it was the United States that defeated Nazism. And when we were done with that war, we were one of the two great superpowers in the world. Stronger, freer, safer, richer than we'd ever been before. And then in 1981, we elected Ronald Reagan president of the United States. And there were those who said, we just need to survive with the Soviet Union. Let them be, leave it alone. Reagan said, no, they're the evil empire. And they belong in the dustbin of history. And he inspired us to sacrifice, to fight the Soviet Union. And in 8 short years, the Berlin Wall came down. And in 10 years, the Soviet Union was gone. And we were the one remaining superpower in the world. Stronger, freer, richer, safer. Right now, it's us and China. And we need to decide, is that a fight that we are willing to fight and that we are strong enough to win? I know we are strong enough to win it. We now need to decide whether we're willing to fight it. Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, Joe Biden, they are distracting us from the big fights. They want to keep you in the little fights because the more they divide us, the easier we are to dominate. When we unite behind great causes, this country is undefeated. The next president of the United States will have the extraordinary honor of governing during our 250th anniversary as a country in 2026. Who do we want doing that? Who do we want that understands how big America can be, how strong America can be, how free America can be, if we're willing to sacrifice to make ourselves and the rest of the world stronger, safer, and freer? I'm running for president to do those things, not the little stuff. Not the little stuff, the big things. I want to be a president of consequence. And I promise you, if you give me the chance, I will be. So let's make it happen here in New Hampshire. Thank you all very much.